hope we can read about history and learn, and I hope we don't have to repeat history and learn, right? Because the Founding Fathers were very clear. If you lose the Republic, if you lose this freedom, it will be extremely hard to get back. And that's one thing about freedom. Once you lose it, the ability to retain it is usually found in blood.
My thinking, it's just like, it's going to be crazy in the next week. So continuing to how to continue to process that, of course, without knowing exactly what's going to unfold. And so maybe the fascist stuff definitely touches on it for sure, because that'll be the kinds of arguments that people are making. Oh, well, Trump is a fascist, so we got to get more desperate to get him out now, and that's going to justify all the big action.
When I just keep running into this, I mean, you see on social media, like they have people.
You interact with people more than I do.
Well, so people have fully bought into two arguments that are absolutely ludicrous if you have any understanding of reality. And one is that Trump is a fascist, and the other one is Trump is a racist. And when I see those, I'm like, I do. I have a copy-paste section on a Word doc because I'm just tired of answering the questions. So I just go to my Word doc and I'm like, copy-paste. Because it's the same thing. And I don't even think people know what a fascist is. Like when they're saying that, I'm like, this one guy the other day, I was like, give me the definition of fascism. And if you copy and paste it from Google, I'm going to know. Click. And he did. But at least he went and looked at it. And I'm like, that's probably the first time he's ever went and looked at it. Like he's just took that talking point and regurgitated it onto social media. And I'm like, I bet he's never really even looked at the definition and then stepped back and went, okay, whose policies more so reflect a fascist movement? And I'm like, I bet he's never done that. And you start to think about that, and it's like, that is the problem. Like, we're just regurgitating rather than thinking about things. Because to me, it's so obvious if you can get past the person, right? Get past Trump, get past Biden, get past their personalities, which is the way the media has framed it up. It's a personality battle, right? Even in Christians, it's become a personality battle. And I'm like, I don't care about personalities. Like, I'm not going to dinner with Trump. I'm not going to dinner with Biden. I actually think dinner with Trump would be better and more fun, but I'm not going to dinner with Trump, right? Biden. But I'm not
have
doing.
To be early dinner.
To be early, he's got to get home for bedtime. But I'm not going to dinner with these people. I'm not voting these people to be my pastor. I'm not voting them to be my seminary professor. I'm voting for them to be the leader of the freest country ever to exist on the planet, and I'm voting them in to keep it that way, not to fundamentally change it, right? I mean, so there's a framework at which that person ought to be operating inside of, not willy-nilly going about it any way that he so pleases. And we're in the middle right now of this cultural Marxist conversation about how cultural Marxism has been implemented into our society from the 60s and how it's fundamentally changing the way that we think and that we no longer think like Americans. There's two countries inside of one, and one is thinking very much towards socialism, and ultimately they don't realize it, but communism, right? They're handing over the keys to the kingdom to a government that has deceived them, and the other one still thinks the way that our founding fathers thought, and we believe the Constitution should be interpreted with the intent that the founding fathers had. Because if it's not interpreted with the intent that the founding fathers had, then you can't it shouldn't be interpreted at all. Like if it's not with the original intent, then there's no intent whatsoever when it comes to the Constitution.
Well, there has to be some real effort. I mean, if you're going to be responsible in, engaging these ideas and formulating some sort of opinion or point of view, then responsible enough to look into and appreciate what these ideas really are, not just, kind of how you've heard about them in passing along the way or the 30,000 foot sales pitch on it that is some romanticized idea in either direction, because you could be all patriotic in the red, white, and blue, but not really founded in the principles and values.
Voting for Trump for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and at least in it just not be principled. So when you're looking back at the Constitution or understanding where these guys come from, because so many people who have their criticisms of our founding or our history, they're looking back on that time and thinking a certain kind of way about these people. Oh, they were just a bunch of wealthy land-owning white men, slave-owning white men.
Killing the Indians.
Yeah, and so they're, we don't want to align ourselves with their philosophies and ideologies. That can't be right.
Right.
When, history, the reality is for one, just so much more complex than that. And, and just having a lot more things that values and ideas that even go back before that. I mean, we're talking about the progress and development of human civilization here.
Yeah.
And its connection to history. And these people, they themselves knowing what's gone on in history, and now in order to create a more perfect union. So,
where's that from?
Yeah, I mean, they know that they're not just, it's not a blank slate. They're not starting fresh out of nowhere, but there's foundations, and so they're going to keep building and shaping and refining the best of what humanity had developed so far in the places and the times. They had to cherry pick it themselves from different civilizations along the way, being influenced, but now they're going to codify it. And it's not as if it came out of nowhere in that moment. Okay, the revolution's happening. I guess we ought to think what we're going to do when it on the other side of it. No, I mean, this is like a good, even the time the colonists are coming here and having their own civilization in the wilderness of America, trying to grow that for a couple of 100 years.
And this is probably where America being isolated from the rest of the world has hindered us in a lot of ways. Because, like you said, these founders, they
helped and hindered.
Yeah, they have come from a place where they knew history. I mean, they knew history around Europe. They knew it around the East, all the countries, the east of Europe and the Eastern countries such as China and all they knew history, and they had understood the Roman Empire, the Greek Empire, the Persian Empire, the Ottoman Empire. Like, they knew all these empires and how these things had worked against their people, right? And so their goal was to set up a system that was ruled by the people, for the people. Not all these other systems where power eventually, even if, I don't know, maybe they never started off with good intentions, but let's say they did, how power always seemed to work its way to the top, to where there was a top-down authoritarian, totalitarian regime or some sort of a system that oppressed the people. And they were like, how could we set up a system to where that doesn't happen here? And that was their goal, right? They went into that room in Philadelphia with that goal in mind. Like, how do we set these things up to where the people will rule this land? And if you pay attention to the way that you have the executive branch, the legislative branch, judicial branch, if you'll pay attention to the way they set these branches up, they set them up in a way that they never intended them to be changed, right? It was very difficult to change legislation or to change law. And then, you have people all the time like, Americans are always just fighting. Like, they're always just fighting in their courts. They're fighting in Congress. They're fighting it's always a war. It was intended to be that way. Like, we were intended to always fight to be able to change laws. That's why executive orders and those kind of things are very dangerous, right? Because that's not what the founding fathers intended to happen in this country. So like you're saying, like, we have so limited understanding on history. And you can tell that by what we're willing to vote for right now, what we're willing to allow the government to have the power over. Like, no citizen in history in one of these systems would look at what we're doing right now, like in the Roman Empire, and go, oh yeah, that's a good policy. No, they would be like, hey, we're living under that policy and it sucks. Don't vote that in.
Yeah, I mean, that's why all these Venezuelan Americans and Cuban Americans and Chinese Americans and others from East Asia are, you know, they're I don't say 100%, but like a lot of them are for Trump because they know what this looks like in practice. They can see the direction that things are going in spite of, you know, any attempts at trying to get us to think otherwise.
Yeah.
You know, the direction certainly is.
And I hope we can read about history and learn, and I hope we don't have to repeat history and learn, right? Because the Founding Fathers were very clear. If you lose the Republic, if you lose this freedom, it will be extremely hard to get back. And that's one thing about freedom. Once you lose it, the ability to retain it is usually found in blood. And that's not just the scariest thing, but just the most disheartening thing. Is like if you want to give up freedom at the end of all this, if we keep going in this direction, then you just give it up and you live as an oppressed people. Give up the Second Amendment, turn in the guns, and just live oppressed and go back to the systems of the past where there was a few at the top who controlled everything, and you just live under them, and they control the means of production and the fruit of production, and that's your life. Or you have an alternative decision, which is to fight and to try to retain it again. Have a revolution, which no one wants to go down that path that has any understanding of war whatsoever, because no one should want to take the life of another person made in the image of God. That should never be a desire or a delight. Sometimes it's a necessity, but it's never the desire or the delight of an individual, or shouldn't be. So just keeping that in mind, like eventually, if we keep going down this path, we will get to a place where we have to make that decision.